Mr. Lee.
Hello. People will be wondering what's happening. We've done 2 shows in 2 weeks now, haven't we?
I know there's something weird.
We've suddenly gone mad.
Does it mean we're still alive? That's the question.
Well, I suppose we must be, unless these are holograms that we've generated.
Yeah, maybe we're AI now.
Well, perhaps so. Perhaps we've been dead for months and we've AI'd a whole series of shows.
Yeah, we
never know, do you?
We've A-upped. That's the Yorkshire version. A-up. Right, let's get on with it.
Yep.
Well, Ronnie, we've got about 25 comments before we even started, which is
really good. It must be something that's popular.
I think Michael and Terry were having a bit of a conversation
They're
about
having a
whether
chat,
Terry was here or not. I think it was. So Michael was apologizing for Terry not being here, and Terry's going, "I'm here." Right. So welcome along, everyone. So Michael was first, then Terry, who was proved that is here. V, hi V. Deb, hello Deb. Jeremy the Ape. No, it's all just chit chat and stuff now. John Cowtag. That's a new name on me. So
yeah. I've just noticed my cup says Lady of the Manor.
Does it?
Lady of the Manor, there we are.
Yeah, and why not?
Why not be Lady of the Manor, eh?
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. So as usual then, folks, this is going out to 3 places, 2 Facebook pages and my YouTube channel. So the best interaction in terms of chatting along with the other chatterers and people in the audience is on my YouTube channel, so you can bear that in mind. And then we will engage with the comments, and we also don't charge for them. We don't believe in all that capitalist stuff about what is it, super chats. Do you know, Ronnie, that Trump has issued one of his things, he signs with that Sharpie. Apparently, if you're anti-capitalist, you're now going to be called Antifa and therefore a terrorist.
You're a terrorist, yeah. Well, I've got a vegan Antifa T-shirt that I wear sometimes, so presumably I'm a terrorist now because of that.
Yeah, so if you've got extreme views about gender, it says extreme views about race, if you're opposed to traditional values about the family, all of these things now are being categorized as thanks Deb, executive order. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Is being vegan going to be classed as terrorism? They're getting close to that, aren't they?
Well, they're creeping up on veganism, and you said, didn't you? I don't know if you mentioned it last week. You said that the good thing now is that the vegan movement is not a threat to anybody.
Well, that's the only reason I can think of why vegans haven't yet been classed as terrorists in the USA. That it's not a big enough movement, and Trump hasn't noticed it.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, they've still got the ALF press office there. Jerry.
Well, is he going to get round to making them? I don't know what the status of the ALF is in the USA. Whether it's already been classed as.
Yeah, so it's all. Yeah, they've already been classed as naughty, at least.
Yeah. There we are. But you see, as we said on our last show a week ago, the danger is of.
Oh, you're showing off now, Ronnie. Our last show a week ago.
A week ago. I mean, I can remember back that far. The danger of reform being elected, and Farage wanted to copy Trump, and of course Farage is a big pro-Hunt guy. So will the if reform become the government, will the Hunt Sabs be classed as a terrorist organisation. It's well within the realms of possibility, isn't it?
It is. Right. So, do you want to tell everybody what we're doing today, and then we've got a little clip to play.
Well, we saw. Well, I think it was you found it. It was a clip on. Was it on Instagram or was it on TikTok or something?
It was a TikTok.
There was a clip of which you're going to show anyway, and that got us talking, and we thought, well, gave us an idea for this show about, how come we've been going all these years and we've not dropped out of activism. Obviously, we've done various forms of activism over the years, but we've kind of never dropped out. And so,
have you ruled out that we might just be stubborn buggers, Ronnie?
Well, yeah. I mean, that could be a quality that activists need, couldn't it? Yeah. Because prompted us to do the show. That's why we thought we would show it first.
Yeah. So should I do that then?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do it. I'm going to put it on that screen like it's so. So here we go, folks.
And following a vegan lifestyle is honestly quite the experience. The majority of the time, I do have to block out the emotions of how I feel towards the reality of what happens to animals, because I would literally not be able to function and live my life because of how deeply I feel towards it and passionate I am about it. But then when I am reminded, and when I do think about those emotions, whether it be from what I've seen online, or I see the animals in a truck go by, or I see the animals in a field because I can't unsee the reason why they are there, then it does just flood those emotions back, and it makes me feel guilty that I don't feel them maybe more often, because I do want to be a voice for the animals, and it's just figuring out obviously the best way to do that with also like looking after my own mental well-being too. Any vegans out there that have advice on balancing between being an advocate and like speaking up for the animals, and like, because it is a massive passion of mine, but then also like balancing your own mental well-being and like not being consumed by those emotions that it brings because of how messed up it is. And like when you see the truth, like you cannot unsee it.
Yeah, proof that it was TikTok there, Ronnie.
But, yes, that's it. Yeah.
Before we go into our main thing, a couple of things I wanted to run past you from that. So some activists, and we've got an interview with Jeremy the ape coming up, and I said this to him too. Some activists would probably say that she was being a bit selfish, and that she was thinking about herself and not our fellow animals. Because it's kind of like, oh, my mental health. Of course, from an activist point of view, there's, in terms of what the animals are going through, there's no comparison, right? So, do you have a view on that?
Well, that is true. There is no comparison, but nevertheless, if something affects you, it affects you, doesn't it? And I think the these feelings of trauma at the realization of what happens all the time, really, to our fellow animals, that really the best way to deal with that is through activism. I think it's far worse to know about these things and not be active in trying to do something about it. I think then that's kind of, that's even worse for the person that experiences it. I mean, one of the reasons because activism keeps you busy and keeps your mind, off those things, because what you're doing is you're focusing on the solution rather than what's going on, if you see what I mean. So I would say that activism itself is an antidote really to that, to those feelings. And I think it's important that you can the thought of what's going on all the time to our fellow animals in various ways, absolutely horrific. Can be something that's paralyzing. Can be something that's paralyzing if that causes people to become depressed, to become morose, for instance. That in itself can prevent them from being active. So I think you kind of do have to. You do have to, in a sense, block it out. It's kind of a question of not going there. It's it happens, but you can't dwell with it. I mean, it would be the same even with other humans when we, think of what happens to other humans, like for instance in Gaza, in Ukraine, in other areas where there's war or where there's starvation and all these things. That's horrific enough what happens to other humans, isn't it? Let alone what happens to our fellow animals.
I do tend to think that you're right about if you know something horrible is going on and you don't do anything, that must be in a way a bit more traumatic in some way.
Yeah. I think
she was saying that she feels guilt about not doing anything, but she's debilitated by what she knows, so she can't do anything. So, I mean, there's a couple of things she picked out two things: the trucks, the trucks that go by. So she's talking about so-called livestock trucks or slaughterhouse trucks, and she also talked, and this is a really interesting one to me, the idea of the fields, right? And some people might see our fellow animals in fields and go, oh, isn't that lovely, kind of thing. I think the more vegan you get, as it were, you start to think, isn't that terrible?
Yeah, I always,
what's going to happen, right?
When I see them in fields, I always, it does remind you when you see the trucks, when you see the animals in the fields, of course it comes into your head what's going to happen to the mystery. I mean, I've got a thing where I when that landscape, looking at landscape, it just itself has become different for me. Because I look at a landscape of fields, and even if there are no animals in those fields, I'm just thinking to myself, that should be forest. That should be forest. Because it should be, really. And so I can't appreciate landscape in the same way as I used to because of that thought that's in my head as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting that because she was saying for the majority of her time, she had to kind of block it out. And so that, because we were talking before we came on about, activism like SAVE, presumably it would, because I was looking in the comments. If you go to the TikTok itself, there's loads and loads, I think there's about 160 comments, and most of them were agreeing with her. And there was a big theme that people said, oh, I just cry every time I see a so-called livestock. Hang on, is Ronnie frozen?
No.
Oh.
You thought I wasn't still alive then for a minute, didn't you?
Yeah, no.
It's funny, he's croaked on air.
Oh, I was so riveting you were.
I'm just intently listening.
I have forgotten what I was bloody saying now.
I could freeze so that you end the show and I get off early, couldn't I?
Yeah, we could both do that, I suppose, couldn't we?
That's it. That.
I would have sworn you frozen then, Ronnie. So what was I saying, for God's sake? I can't
You were
remember.
saying about people crying when they see. I had a friend years ago. When I was involved with the ALF rescuing animals, she used to take in a lot of the animals. She had like a little small holding, and she used to take in. She took in some beagles that were rescued, and then she took in some before they were taken to their sort of forever homes, and then she took in some battery hens. That I think she looked after them, and they got all their plumage back and everything. But she couldn't even see a picture. You had to be really careful of keeping any magazines away from her, from the various, animal protection groups. Because if she looked through a magazine and she saw just a picture of an animal being exploited, an animal that was suffering, she would just completely break down, and that was just that was just a picture. So you have to be like really careful with what she saw. And so there are people that, and she's probably like, a kind of perhaps extreme example of that, but some people are like that.
Yeah, I made a point in one of the talks that I did, my sociology talk, and also in my PhD, about when an animal advocate offers somebody a leaflet, you're kind of offering them pain, really.
You kind of are. I mean, I tend to not. I mean, when I'm door dropping leaflets, I avoid door dropping anything that's got graphic imagery on it, or even graphic description, because I mean, my main concern is that a child might pick the leaflet up, especially with graphic images. So I think the idea that these animals are being exploited and oppressed and killed, and why that's wrong, I think that can be got across without graphic images and without graphic descriptions, to be honest.
Well, but that to me, that point to me raises the welfare rights thing, because if you want to describe terrible things that have happened and the cruelty and all that kind of stuff, that's one thing. But if you want to talk like Tom Reagan, kind of in abstract about things like rights violations, those kind of things, I mean Reagan sometimes in some of his talks he goes into graphic detail, but he didn't have to. Like if you look at the famous kind of 8-minute one from from the animal rights debate, there's no graphic stuff there, and yet that's like the quintessential rights-based animal rights talk, even though it's very short, right? So I suppose if you are talking about cruelty and describing it, you're automatically talking about the details then. But I mean, we've all done it. We were talking, weren't we, about when the movement was focused on vivisection. I mean, some of the leaflets were incredibly graphic.
Oh yes, rabbits with their stuff had been put in their eyes, and monkeys in restraining devices, and
remember the cat with the sling,
terrible stuff. Yeah.
And what about all the anti-fur stuff? That was incredibly graphic, wasn't it?
Some of that as well, animals in traps. I think the idea was to kind of persuade people not to buy fur coats, and get them kind of horrified at what went on. That was the object of those leaflets, I think.
Yeah. Now, Deb brought something up that I was going to bring up with you later, but before we lose it, I want to ask you this. It's quite interesting thing. Think about Ronnie and Roger having gone to prison but still active. In some ways, did going to prison help? It kind of enforced a break on us, didn't it?
It kind of did, yes. I mean, in a sense, I kind of carried on activism in prison, but it was in a different way. It was through writing and through corresponding with people, and I obviously started off the magazine Archangel while I was in jail, and I wrote most of the first edition of it, and then contributed to,
But again, if you think of the articles, it was about doing stuff again. So you're making that point that you just made before.
It was about So, but once again, it was kind of it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you've got to kind of think about. I mean, what kept me going in prison was that I just thought, well, however bad the conditions are that I'm being kept in, which weren't horrific conditions, sometimes weren't very pleasant. When you're 3 in a cell and there's a pot for everyone to piss in, or a bucket, not very pleasant. But it's, I mean, compared with what so many of our fellow animals go through, that's nothing. Even compared with how a lot of humans have to live, that is nothing as well. So I didn't think I had the right to be depressed about my situation.
Yeah, that's what I used to, because even when I was thrown into solitary with the famous plastic zoot suit, um, they there was no furniture. It was just a bare room, and I must have been on suicide watch or something, but because they kept looking in about every quarter of an hour. But that was my thought. At least I'm not in a laboratory.
Yeah.
At
And so
least I'm not in a farm.
you put your situation into perspective, and I think that's really important. So you've kind of got to, you've got to be mindful of the situation for the animals, but not to and not to dwell on the graphic detail of it. It's that a kind of balancing act like that, in a sense, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Jeremy's making a point. I think Francione did say this, that he doesn't have the right to burn out. So I can kind of understand what he means. So even if you have to kind of tamp it down a bit.
Yeah. See, I think this is the thing, and I think this is one of the difficulties people have, that there are lots of different forms of activism, and some are highly stressful, and others are low stress, but they all contribute, and they're all they're important. I would argue that really some of the low stress ones are probably some of the most effective things you can do. So there's always activism that virtually everyone can do.
Yeah,
Even if they want to avoid.
You've got a brilliant perspective that's going to come up later about one of your theories about why people stop is because they no longer can do what they like to do.
Yes.
And so that could be even things like sabbing, which they might find exhilarating or something.
But yes.
Yeah. We'll come back.
Why I always hated sabbing. I went because I felt it was a duty, but I never enjoyed it. And there were people that enjoyed it, and I thought, how can you enjoy this?
Yeah, I don't get that. I mean, you're in danger all the time.
Yeah,
you're
and
getting
just
stuff
and
thrown
I
at
just
you.
well, I kind of thought also that it was like, I mean, often you'd go out and you'd be following the hunt all day, and nothing much would happen, and so there was a lot of time spent. There was a lot of time spent hanging about, and it was like a whole day. And I thought, is this really kind of, how efficient is this? How effective is this in terms of?
Yeah, I started thinking that, especially when
But there are some, but I think it's a worthwhile activity. I still support the SABs. I've been involved in fundraisers for them, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a worthwhile activity. It's just that it wasn't, and there obviously there are some people that are really into it, but it's just that I wasn't. I kind of went more as it was like a duty more than something. I didn't enjoy it.
I can relate to that. And another thing that made me question sabbing was, well, a couple of things. I started to be able to recognize animal use facilities, to use that phrase, from the outside. And so I could recognize a pig unit and a battery unit and a broiler shed and this kind of stuff. And I knew where all the laboratories were. And you're kind of going on a sab and you're driving past all of that, for the chance of, saving usually one or two of our fellow animals. I'm not trying to downplay that.
No.
I do know that there's been times when we were sabbing, when we killed someone on the road.
Yeah, that's happened to me as well. Yeah.
Because you're charging around and stuff.
Yeah. And it's in the country, isn't it? And country lanes and yes.
That's right. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I much preferred it when I got into the ALF stuff, and we used to go to the hunt kennels in the middle of the night and damage their vehicles. I much preferred that because it only took a short period of time, and that was it. And you had a chance of stopping them all together then.
kind of like maximizing your output, really, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
I remember we killed an owl once. That was really upsetting.
Yeah, I think I was on a hunt where one of the subs vehicles killed a kingfisher, actually,
King,
as
yeah,
well.
wow.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not normally we talk about squirrels and rabbits,
Yeah,
right?
squirrels and rabbits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, of course, hares are a problem around the coursing areas and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, Mr. Ronnie, I've got you've got a set of questions that you wrote. So, shall we start going through those? You wanted to start with, or at least explore, what do we mean by dropping out? And,
Yes. Yeah.
and what rate of activists do we know personally that don't seem to be around anymore?
Well, I mean, I'd say dropping out is when people cease becoming active in any way, and of course, it's whether or not does it or doesn't it include rescue. This is the thing, because I know people that have, quite a few people I've known over the years have ceased being activists, have ceased being campaigners, but have gone into rescue instead. Now, do we count that as dropping out of activism, or don't we? I mean, obviously, it's not as bad as not doing anything at all, but those people are no longer campaigning, are they? So how would we? Is that a kind of grey area in this? No. But I think that in terms of my personal experience of people dropping out, I mean, that's happened all my life. Right. I mean, I started off being involved in hunt salves, running a local group, and then the ALF, and there are
not as though you're that ugly, is it, Ronnie?
there are lots of people. There are lots of people from those days that I would say are no longer active. I mean, just because you don't hear what a person's doing doesn't mean they're not active. They could be still doing something in a quiet way, couldn't they? But as far as I know, there's a very large number of people from those days that are no longer active.
And what about the SABs? Because in my experience of early day sabbing, is that I don't think there was that many vegans. I think there were quite a few, but I think there were probably more vegetarians, and then there was quite a few flesh consumers. So
yes,
they probably just specialized, if you like, on sabbing.
Well, what happened in our group when I was involved in? I mean, I started when I started sabbing. I was living in Luton, and I started a group there. And as far as I know, all the other people that were involved in that group with me, none of them are any longer active. I mean, some of them might not even be alive now, because they'd be probably almost as old as me. And then a bit later, this is in the 1970s, I was involved in running a group in North London. And what was interesting is that we turned loads of people vegan that joined the group. And most people that joined the group weren't vegan, and some of them were like determined they wouldn't be vegan. They were just interested in saving the fox, and they weren't interested in going vegan. But most of them actually did end up going vegan. But once again, apart from when I was involved in sabbing in London, I think, as far as I know, there's just like one guy that's still active in sabbing, that was involved in that group.
Jeremy here makes a good point, Ronnie, because he's talking about his own situation. He's running a micro sanctuary now, and but he's not very visible anymore, and so people might think that he quit. I mean, I know on Facebook, right? I know a couple of people that I knew were very, very active in all kinds of things, including the BYV and ALF and all that kind of stuff. Now, they're still around, but I haven't got a clue what they're doing. It doesn't mean that they're not doing anything.
That's why that's why I said earlier, you can't, just because you don't hear that person's doing something doesn't mean they're not. So I wouldn't presume. I'm just, speaking in general terms, it does appear that a lot of people are no longer no longer active. And of course, in a sense, I think that rescue can be a form of activism. I mean, I think a lot of these sort of vegan-run sanctuaries for farmed animals, can play a part in vegan outreach. I think a lot of them could do more than they do, to be honest. But I think they can help educate people to become vegan.
I suppose we all could do more than we do. But how do you define active, Ronnie?
Well, I think it's trying to it's kind of trying to change the situation, isn't it? And it's probably easier to look at various forms of activism, doing more than just say being a vegan in your personal life. It's actually making an effort to go out there and change the situation in the outside world, whether that's through education or direct action or whatever. I think that's how I define it.
Yeah, okay. So if you say be a vegan in your personal life, that's somebody who understands the philosophy of veganism, probably, excuse me, would talk about it.
Yeah, I think
or even plant-based in your, but aren't they forms of activism? Those two.
Well, I think someone who's vegan and they're bound to be asked about it, and they're bound to be, and by just being vegan, I suppose they, for example, they can change other people. But but with activism, I'm really talking a bit more than that, about actually making an extra effort to go out there and do things. That's what I mean by activism.
Yeah. Okay. And you say in your own experience, because we were talking about the NAL and the Liberation Leagues, and I don't think I know anybody that I did know from the NAL. I mean, you don't see them on social media unless that is itself an issue, that there's a generation.
No, it's one or two people I know that I think one or two people I know that were involved in the Animal Liberation Leagues that are still active in different ways. There are some, probably the vast majority aren't, but there are a few that I know that are still active.
Do you see TikTok as activism?
Well, I think that I think we have to be careful. I think social media can be a form of activism.
I can feel a but coming on. So what's the but?
We can well. I think the difficulty, we have to be careful that we're just not talking to ourselves as vegans on social media. That if all our friends and followers are also vegan, or most of them are, then we're just talking to people that have already been converted, so to speak. And I think that's that can be a difficulty with social media.
Yeah, well, Bryn here is talking about live streaming or streaming live, and you inevitably end up with people who are not vegan.
Yeah, I think it can be. I think it. But once again, you see, that's someone taking time to do something outside of their ordinary life to educate others. So that would be a form of activism. You're going a step further, aren't you, than just living your everyday life. You're saying, right, I'm going to take some time to go on social media to try to educate others to go vegan. So yeah, that is a form of activism.
Yeah, this is interesting from Jennifer, because Jennifer's lives got lots of engagement, but Jennifer is one of the people who don't like to engage with the graphic images.
Yeah,
or even the arguments might be, so that's a real kind of, it's a difficult thing, because if you get asked questions, then you feel the need to be able to answer them, don't you? And so if getting the information to answer questions is traumatizing. There's a major problem there, isn't there?
Well, I think I mean I think you can sort of, if you're doing stuff on social media, you can set it up so people can't comment, and then you don't have to answer questions, but they still see what's
Well,
what
if they
you put
can't
out there.
comment, they're not going to engage.
Yeah, but you see, but if what you're putting out is educational, then that can still change people without them
I think
necessarily
it's a
commenting.
double-edged sword, this, because
Yeah.
usually if it's just, I think it's the kind of stuff that I do. I think most people who see my stuff on TikTok, Instagram, and that are fellow vegans. Whereas if I went live, I'd get a lot more non-vegans. The problem is that the kind of non-vegan that is attracted to that are the ones who just want to be a complete arsehole, and so I'm not quite sure about the educational, amount of education that goes on in those either. So I think it's like a double-edged sword, really.
Yeah, I think I think we've got to be careful, maybe not to overestimate social media as a means of education. I mean, one thing that I did sort of on behalf of my local vegan group during lockdown, when we couldn't get out there, was to advertise on it was on Facebook and Instagram, and it was producing like videos that were less than a minute long, promoting veganism, and then they would just go out on social media within the local area, and people it would just come up on people's news feed, and you get some indication of, you get some feedback, because what you do, you put a link to a website and you get feedback on the number of people that have clicked on the link and visited the website promoting veganism. So you get some feedback. That doesn't say that they've actually become vegan, but it does say that they've looked at the website, and that was pretty good. The kind of results from that were really pretty good in terms of of people doing that.
Yeah, it is frustrating though, because there's probably no form of activism where you can be sure that you've kind of done it.
No, you can't be sure, but we all know, and I'm all saying this, we all know that we all became vegan because we received information in one form or another. So the more information that's out there, it's inevitable that will result in more people becoming vegan.
Yeah, well, of course, AV have claimed a couple of times that they've kind of cracked it. And I still meet people in Dublin, some activists who kind of don't really do what I do, but they will do AV because they all believe that that's the most effective form of activism that there is, full stop. And the reason they believe that is because they keep getting told that it is that. So the latest version of it is kind of holding people to account, almost like you don't be friendly to them, and until they say they're going to go vegan, they're going to live vegan. From that moment on, you kind of regard them not as enemies, but kind of, I don't know, enemy combatants or something. Because if they don't say, right, I'm going to be vegan now for the rest of my life, and they put their hand out, if they don't say, oh, you've given me something to think about, you don't shake their hand. And so there's loads of videos now of AV activists just walking away from people.
Yeah, you see, I tend to think that's a mistake, because well, first of all, people that say that they say there and then that they're going to be vegan, is that something that they're going to carry on with, or have they said that because that's what they know that the activist wants to hear? First of all,
well, it were a way of getting away from them.
Right, getting away. And secondly, there are people that, I mean, I had my famous experience of the guy in prison I spoke to that was adamant he'd never become vegan, and we both had to go our separate ways. And I was friendly to him, wasn't unfriendly to him. And then when I met him again on another sentence, he told me that not long after he'd had the conversation with me, he'd become vegan because he thought about what I said and realised I was right. Now, if I'd not been pleasant to him, he probably wouldn't have thought about what I'd said. I mean, amusingly, he'd become vegan, but he hadn't ceased his life of crime. Hence he was back in jail, and I was able to meet him again. But that's to me, that's stuck in my mind as an example of people thinking about it afterwards.
Have you not seen those claims on I see these claims on social media that people say they're grateful for somebody to kind of scream at them and everything, because it was that shocked them into thinking about the issue, and now they're vegan.
I mean, I think that might work with some people. I think the majority of people it probably wouldn't work with, to be honest.
So it's kind of like different strokes for different folks, though, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I'm sure lots of people have become vegan because of AV, but I think lots of people have become vegan through all sorts of different forms of outreach. So we have to
because it's planting seeds, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's more a question of there's a big problem of people not being vegan, but we've also got a huge problem of so many vegans not being activists, and then there's an additional problem to that when people who have been actives cease being activists as well, and there's obviously quite a high rate of that. I think
it does seem that the video that we've shown, that little clip, I mean that explains why a hell of a lot of people, especially if you then see all the comments, why people who regard themselves as vegan, we might say they're plant-based, but they regard themselves as vegan, but they'll never become activists because it's too traumatic for them.
But you see, I think you can. I think there are ways that you can avoid the trauma. I mean, I steadfastly avoid anything that would cause me stress.
But say, Ronnie, contacting Animal Aid to get some leaflets off them.
Yeah,
people probably would do that through their website. I mean, that's gonna open up all kinds of stuff that they can potentially.
Well,
see.
It depends on how disciplined you are about what you click on and what you don't click on, doesn't it? I mean, you can order leaflets without really looking at anything very much. If you don't go there, it's learning not to go there. It's learning not to, not to go to places where you're going to see things, and that's what I do. I won't go where I'm going to see something graphic, because I don't need to see it. I'm already vegan. I'm already an activist. I don't need to see that stuff. And so why should I put myself under the stress and the trauma of seeing that when I don't need to? And so I avoid it. And it's kind of not difficult to avoid.
Wouldn't someone like Joey say to you, you need to see it so you can describe it?
Well, I don't need. Well, we know that if you're specifically say talking about animals being used for food, but it kind of applies all across the board as well. You don't need to. We know that those animals are exploited. We know they're used, and we know that they're sent to the slaughterhouse at a fraction of their natural lifespan. We know that already, and so what more do you need to know than that to be able to say that it's wrong?
No, but I mean, you're missing the point of modern day activism, because most modern day activism, especially which involves screens, is the activists are going, well, look at that. What do you think of that? Right. And you're pointing at the horror. Right?
Well, I mean, I'm not opposed to people like doing that, and I can understand it as a conversation starter. I mean, I've taken part in We the Free events where they show videos, they show slaughterhouse videos. People sit and watch a slaughterhouse video. I've not seen the video. I've avoided seeing the video because I don't need to. Because invariably, what people say afterwards, when you ask them, well, how do you feel after you've watched that? Inevitably, they say that's terrible and they should do it in a kind of way.
Yeah.
And then well, I mean, it's standard practice anyway, what the video shows. But then you get on to then you get to the kind of the talking about fundamental wrong, that whatever way those animals would be killed, they'd still be killed, wouldn't they? And that's the fundamental wrong. And then you get, at least I when I talk to people afterwards, that's what I talk about. But it starts the conversation. The video starts the conversation, basically.
Yeah, but it's inevitably treatment based and people looking for welfare reforms, because that's what's in their head as animal welfarists, right? The people that come along.
That's what people tend to say. That was terrible, and they should do it in a kind of way. That you get a lot of, not necessarily, but a lot of it.
They say, don't they?
Yeah, a lot of the response is that, and so then you have to talk about the fundamental wrong of those animals being exploited and killed in the first place, no matter how they're killed. That's the thing.
And do you think that that switch works for them, or do they just keep concentrating on the treatment and it should be reformed?
No, I find it gets people. You then have a conversation about the wrongfulness of humans using our fellow animals and killing our fellow animals for food when we don't need to.
Yeah. So that's the seed that you're planting, right? Not just look at how horrible this is.
Well, what happens is it attracts, it just creates, it starts a conversation. The video starts a conversation, but the conversation that you have isn't about, yes, I agree with you, there should be kinder ways of killing those animals. That isn't the conversation that's had. The conversation is about the fundamental wrong of killing them, no matter how they're killed.
Yeah, it's not the common language of our movement, though, is it, Ronnie?
Well, no. I mean, the talk is so much about cruelty, and there is a lot of cruelty, and there's horrendous suffering, and the vast majority of farmed animals are kept in intensive conditions, and all that's very true. But that isn't the fundamental wrong. The fundamental wrong is that they're exploited and that they're killed. That's the fundamental wrong, or the fundamental wrongs involved in it. It's not the conditions, and it's not the treatment. Okay, moving on to point 2. Yeah, point 2. Yeah, how long have we got? Yeah, and what I found in more recent years. I mean, I remember going to going back to practical example. Nancy Phipps was a very that's Jill Phipps's mother, Jill Phipps, who was tragically killed by a lorry at protesting against live exports outside Coventry Airport. Quite a number of years ago. Was it 1995 or something like that?
A long time ago, yeah.
A long time ago. And her mum, Nancy, was a prominent activist as well, and then she had a long illness and died. And I went to a funeral. This is going back a few years now as well. And at the funeral, there were lots of ex-ALF activists. They're all afterwards, like at the reception or whatever it's called after the funeral. And I went around talking to them, asking, and most of them weren't doing anything anymore. I mean, they're still vegan, but said, "Oh, what are you up to these days?" Oh, I don't do any activism now. And it kind of seemed that once they were no longer able to do ALF stuff, they didn't do anything. It was like that was, that they weren't able to make the transition, or didn't want to make the transition to other forms of activism.
So do you think those types of individuals, I know we're talking in general terms, so that's probably not fair really, but do you think that they need a pretty big personal payoff in order to do it, in the same way as you were saying that some people enjoyed sabbing? and so if they can't do it, then the alternatives to it are kind of boring.
There could be an element of that. I mean, it could also be an element of, you see, the ALF didn't engage with ordinary people at all. It was just like a direct war against the people that oppressed our fellow animals. The ordinary public weren't in the equation really whatsoever. And so, if you're going to make a transition to that form of activism, and you're going to then, go out on the street and do street stalls and stuff like that, you are then having to engage with the public, and that might be what those people don't want to do. I mean, I found it difficult when
wasn't it?
Yeah, I found it difficult when I decided that I had to change my form of activism, and was looking around for another form of activism, and decided, doing street stalls and stuff like that, it's like, I should be getting into that. I was very nervous because I'd never spoken to members of the public before. And I went with some other activists that regularly did street stalls and kind of, helped them and learnt off them and got confidence. And then I was able to do it myself. But I kind of know that feeling of like, making that transition from, being isolated from the public to kind of having to speak to them. And I think there are people that can't make that transition. And I think, you do get some of those people going to rescue because, once again, they don't have to deal with the public. They're just dealing with rescued animals. So I think that may be a reason, that reticence, of actually talking to people, of kind of being involved with the public. But nevertheless, I think that, if you're gonna, if you really care about what is happening to our fellow animals, then really it's important to make that effort and say, no, I'm going to overcome this barrier, and I am going to learn to engage with members of the public.
Okay, I think we can probably skip number 2 because we've kind of dealt with
the other thing, the other talking about dropping out. What I've experienced more recently is people dropping out of vegan outreach. I've been involved in several sort of local vegan groups, and a hell of a lot of people have been involved in outreach with those groups and have dropped out for a variety of reasons. So we normally talk when this subject comes up, we normally talk about things like COVID and stuff, don't we? Well, yeah. I mean, there's like a kind of, I got a whole list here of that I put together of reasons why people drop out, and we could go through that. The first one's death. Death is a big cause of dropout, or can be a cause of dropout. Personally, I don't think it's an excuse, but there we are. A lot of people cease to be active when they die.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fairly good excuse, to be honest.
Well, I don't know. I think people use it as an excuse. Death. Anyway, illness. Of course, people get ill and they're just unable to be active. But you see, we can actually do stuff to prevent that. We can try to eat a healthy diet, to get exercise, to get proper sleep, to avoid smoking, drinking, and drugs. And
what illnesses are you thinking of?
Sorry,
what illnesses are you thinking of?
Well, most illnesses are actually caused by lifestyle, aren't they? They're caused by people's lifestyle. There are some that are hereditary. There's some that somebody can become injured through no fault of their own. But most illnesses are caused by lifestyle. So I think to me, part of being an activist and wanting to sustain yourself as an activist is to try to live healthily. I think that's really important. That we try to avoid doing stuff that's going to make us ill. So
before you go on, Jeremy, can you explain a bit more? I think I know. Is it kind of donating her skin or something, isn't it? But do you know what Ingrid Newkirk is planning after death?
I don't know. Quite intriguing. I mean, perhaps she's going to be, I don't know, she's going to be mummified or something. So the next thing I've kind of got is life gets in the way. In other words, that people get overtaken by the, like it's like when we were active way back in the 70s. There's a lot of young people. It was all young people, not all, but a lot of it was younger people. Late teens, early 20s, the vast majority. And so there wasn't anything to stop them being active. But then what happens then? They get married, they get a job, they get a mortgage, and then there's all these things that get in the way of them being active. And it's those things are really hard to avoid for all of us, aren't they? As we get older, you get these things that encumber you, these encumbrances that that take up your time and your energy and all that, and you can't be active. And I think the thing with that is, that does happen to all of us, but nevertheless, despite that, I think there are ways, despite that, there are still opportunities to be active. It may not be the same sort of activism as we used to do when we weren't kind of held back by things like that. But nevertheless, I think you still can be active in one way or another, despite.
Oh, we can all do this.
Yeah.
Various body parts to be distributed. What do you mean distributed? What the hell does that mean?
Well, is it that people can buy a leg or something?
Well, use it as
have it in a cabinet or something on display. I don't know what that. I really don't know. I don't know what that is. That's very strange.
Okay. So this is the usual Peter media whore thing, isn't it? It's an outrageous stunt, really.
Oh yeah, she's going to send her.
Yeah.
That's just a stunt, isn't it? That. So that's the thing, and it's easy to get distracted by other things in life. It's like a kind of, there's all the shiny things that might distract us from activism. All these things that are kind of are pretty meaningless, really, but people can kind of get interested in these other things that aren't active, that aren't activism, put their time and energy into those things, other hobbies, other interests.
What do you think about if you've got strong? This came up once in Sentient Rights Ireland. They did a webinar, and the person said that their family life was the most important thing in their life, and that veganism would take second fiddle, play second fiddle to the family life, and so that's not something that. I mean, I've never really had strong family ties, and so maybe that's helped. I'm not quite sure.
You see, but the thing is, I think that shows a lack of awareness of the true conditions of existence, doesn't it? That the lack of awareness of the true horror of what is happening to our fellow animals. That somebody could say that. That could say that something is more important than the struggle.
I think it's a little bit deeper than that on the social, psychological level. For some people, their family is deeply, deeply important, and that they're influenced by their other family members. They're, they won't speak about their veganism to them because, and all that kind of stuff. And they would really be influenced by if they were doing something that the rest of their family didn't like,
But
that would really kind of tamp
why
down
is that?
what they would
Why
do.
is that? Why is that so important? You see, I don't understand. I don't understand that. How can anything be more important than the struggle against the greatest evil that's ever existed on Earth? How can anything be more important than that?
I mean, it's kind of summed up by blood is thicker than water, though, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because blood is thicker than water, right? It's exactly the opposite meaning to what you think. People say blood is thicker than water to say family ties are more important than other things. But no, the blood is thicker than water comes from a saying that is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And what that means is the bond you have with people who feel the same as you is greater than the family bond. It's great. The water of the womb, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And it means exactly the opposite to what people think it means.
The blood of the covenant.
The blood of the covenant, the covenant where you come together with people that feel the same as you.
Yeah, but most people think that's their family, don't they, Ronnie?
No, the water of the womb is the family. The blood of the covenant, in other words, the covenant is what that means, people that feel the same as you, and that very often isn't your family, is it? It's your friends and people that, like, in the animal liberation struggle, it's people that feel the same as us. The blood of the covenant, that bond is thicker than the water of the womb. The water of the womb is like the family bond, the family thing. I didn't
think the conversation was going to go anywhere near this.
No, but that is wrong. It's used in completely opposite. When people say blood is thicker than water, they use it completely opposite way to what it really means.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, my experience with the family. My brother was 10 years senior than me. He's very, very focused on the family, and in fact, he wanted all the family members to kind of live in the same village in Yorkshire, and we'd split by then. And when my father died, he wanted us to go to the funeral, even though my father was a really violent guy, including to my brother, right? But family was so important to him that he thought that it was our duty to go.
No, I just don't understand where that comes from at all.
No, well, I mean, we didn't go.
No, I just don't understand. I just don't understand that, because your family is just by chance, isn't it? They can be, those people.
I don't think we can. I don't think we should kind of downplay the importance of family to some people. I think it's central to their life.
Yeah, central to their life. I don't understand why. That's the thing. I don't deny that it is. It's just that it seems kind of
very early on in my activism, when I was in Liverpool, I adopted John Page as my brother and rejected my brother.
Well, yeah, but John Page would be more your brother, wouldn't he? Because it's the same thing. It's the blood of the covenant, and he was a person with a similar, views.
Because my brother was a pigeon fancier, pigeon racing guy, and I would go to his house, and you'd lift up the lid of the old-fashioned dustbin, with the lid, and there'd always be a couple of dead pigeons in there.
They kill them. Yeah, my cousin used to be race pigeons, and that, it'd be the same.
If they do anything wrong, like for a second, like because they're supposed to come straight in and then get their ring put into a machine.
If they don't come back in time from a race, then they get rid of them.
Which is why, if anybody ever finds a pigeon who has kind of gone off or been injured, and they've got the racing stuff, if you're supposed to, I think even by law in Britain anyway, you're supposed to contact the phone number on. If you do, they're going to get killed.
I did that. There was a racing pigeon in. Strange enough, we had a spaniel, and a
racing spaniel.
I caught her running around the garden with a pigeon in her mouth.
Right.
And I got the pigeon out of the mouth, and the pigeon was completely uninjured. Right? And this pigeon had a ring, and I was about 12 years old at the time. And there was a ring on the pigeon, and I phoned up. I managed to find out where the pigeon came from. The guy that had the pigeon. He was a guy down in Kent, and I phoned him up. And I said, "Oh, I've got your pigeon here, standing in our garden." And he said, "Oh, just wring its neck. No good to me now." And I said, "I'll come down there to Kent and I'll wring your neck." I said to this guy on the phone. So what happened was I managed. There were some guys up the road that had like a pigeon sanctuary. They looked after all these sort of waifs and strays of pigeons, and so I took the pigeon to them, and they cared for him.
But that actually, technically, that could have been illegal.
Yeah, it may well have been, but I wasn't going to give it back to the guy. Give the pigeon back to the guy for them to wring their neck. No, but that's what they like. That's absolutely true. No,
amazing, isn't it?
Right.
Going back to diverted into human issues now.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Animals only people are going to love this. Go on.
Well, how I look at it is this. You see, we're talking. We say the welfare people. Let the welfare people do welfare, and the vegans do rights. You see, well, how I look at it is there's, I'm concerned about human issues, the oppression and persecution of humans by humans. But how I look at it is there's loads of humans concerned about human issues that aren't vegan. So I tend to think the priority of vegans should be to campaign for our fellow animals, especially as the situation for our fellow animals in general is far worse than the situation for humans.
But all you're saying, Ronnie, is that vegans should focus on the focus of veganism.
Focus on the focus figure, yeah, but a lot of them don't. I know a lot of vegans who campaign all the time for humans, but they don't campaign for our fellow animals at all. I do know quite a few people like that. So that's that one.
See, well, Ronnie, Reagan said that in that famous speech, the first line of service for these animal advocates was human service, but he was talking about their job in that case, not just what they would choose to do. Whereas
yeah. I mean, obviously, people have to work to earn a living, and you do get a lot of people involved in campaigning for our fellow animals who have jobs that involve caring for humans, because that's the sort of person they are. But that's a person's job.
Well, that's a good balance, then, isn't it?
They're doing that. They're doing that for a living because they have to earn a living. That's what I'm saying. But it's outside of that I'm talking about, really.
Yeah. Okay.
The other one is I think a lot of people have noticed that with our vegan group, really, that COVID caused people to get into all these conspiracy theories, and a lot of them people have pursued those rather than promoting veganism. We had people who used to do door dropping. They got into the conspiracy theories, and they're all on that now, instead of promoting veganism. And so I think that was something that particularly happened during COVID, when it started with, conspiracy theories over COVID and then spread to all sorts of other things. Then once people get on that slippery slope, so that's been a problem. And the other thing that where COVID played a part in people not becoming active or not remaining active was because people got out of the habit, because during the lockdown we weren't able to get out there and do stuff, and a lot of people got that out of the habit. And I think quite a lot of groups have suffered from this, where that their activists stopped doing activism during COVID or during the lockdown because they couldn't get out there, and then got in the habit of doing something else instead, and never got back to the activism. And so
can I just do a little bit of housekeeping, because I'm getting messages saying that our signal is unstable suddenly. So are we still coming through, folks, in the chat? Are you still? Because I know you froze for a little bit there, Ronnie. Genuine this time.
Really?
Yeah.
Possibly so. I don't think you froze. I think you're still all right.
Yeah. So can you're good, right?
Yes,
Well, I
right.
know that, but am I still online?
And another reason is what we covered before, trauma. What happens to the animals? I mean, we've already spoken a lot about that, and I think the answer is to like avoid that as much as possible. If you're someone that does,
Do
is
you
particularly
think, Ronnie, that do you think that one alternative now, or an addition to the COVID thing, that we all kind of jump on as a reason for why nobody's doing anything nowadays, that kind of stuff? Do you think it's the current political climate when people
well,
see society moving right,
yeah,
and veganism seems to be further and further away in that sense?
I mean, it could be. I mean, there's a long term. There's kind of a much longer term thing than that as well, with regard to if you're kind of talking about activism in terms of numbers, numbers of people on demonstrations and that kind of thing. There's been a decline in that for many years. I mean, if you think of back in the 1980s, now there wasn't really much promotion of veganism back then, but anti-vivisection was a big thing, and there were marches like on World Day for Animals in Laboratories. There were marches involving 10,000, 20,000 people, even I think, in the 1980s. And that number of people on would be kind of unthinkable now. I mean, now that the marches, when they've done marches for World Day in recent years, there'd be there'd been about 500 people, 500, maybe 700 if they're lucky.
And is it getting to the stage where the age is going up all the time as well?
And yeah, because the vast majority of people involved in those days were young
So where are the
people.
youngsters gone?
Yeah, you see the youngsters. You see what's happened to the youngsters, and I think this is because of a change of culture in society. The culture of our society has changed, so that young people are no longer. I mean, it was always I mean, obviously, even in those days, the vast majority of young people weren't active. It was just that a lot more young people were active then than are now. And there's obviously a reason for that, or a variety of reasons. But why don't young people become involved like they used to? Because now, if in back in the day, it would be rare to see someone over 30. There would be some, but they'd be a small number. Whereas now it's completely the other way around, and it's rare to see someone under 30, and even rarer see someone like in their early 20s or a teenager. You get the odd one, and you get more retired people than you get young people on stuff now. So there's obviously a number of reasons why that's happened, and that's a major reason why numbers have declined.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. The next one I've got is people, and this is an important one. People losing heart at slow progress. What happens is people learn about what happens to the animals. They think, this is terrible, and they throw themselves into it. I'm gonna do everything I can to stop this. They throw themselves into it, and then time goes on, and they see very little has changed, despite all their effort, despite all their angst, and the kind of their determination to create change. That very little changes.
Yeah, Jeremy makes this very point in the interview that's coming up.
Yeah, and they become disheartened, and so it's really important to sort of point out that what we're dealing with is a marathon. I mean, the campaign to end the slave trade took 80 years. It took 80 years. And that was, what we're looking at with the oppression of our fellow animals is something that's much more, even more deep seated, in our culture even than slavery. So it's going to take a long time to bring about change. And it's important.
You're saying the young ones are online.
Yeah, I think they are online, but they're kind of but I mean, it seems that of all the age groups, the people most likely to become vegan are the younger people. but it's, you know, whether they're sort of promoting veganism online. I mean, obviously, you know, the message is spreading between them somehow, isn't it? You know, in order for them, more of them to become vegan. But yeah, I think that's probably true. I think that a lot of them are online. The next one was people can no longer do their favourite action, which we've already covered. Now another big one is people falling out with others in the movement. People falling out with others in the movement, and you know there is, you know, there is a lot of nastiness around. You know, people aren't very pleasant to one another very often, but I don't see that as a reason for someone to fall out. I mean, if you don't get on with someone, then just don't work with them. I mean, we've had examples of that in our group where people have fallen out one with another, and they've ceased activism when there was no reason to, because they didn't need to be active with the person they fell out with.
This is a human problem, isn't it, Ronnie? Because I mean, obviously the anti-vivisection movement, I mean, like the BUAV came from the NAVs and all that kind of stuff, and you know, there's all that kind of history. But the same goes for left-wing politics, right-wing politics. You know, there's fissures and splits all the time because of that. And so what they tend to do is they divert off and do something else, but they don't just stop doing.
Yeah, but I mean, in our local group, you know, we've had examples of people falling out one with another, and then just stopping, saying, right, I'm not going to be involved anymore, and then not doing anything. Whereas it's like not thinking about, well, you know, what I'm doing is what I'm doing is for the animals. Isn't to do with like how I get on with other people, and I don't have to involve myself with people I don't get on with. I mean, I can do, you know, you can do stuff on your own, like you can deliver leaflets on your own, or you can just get
Ronnie,
together.
that falling out you're talking about, was that online or was that face to face, as it were?
It was. There's been examples of both, to be honest. Examples of both.
Because I mean, I remember Bruce Friedrich, of all people, made this point years and years ago, which is that people say stuff online which they would not say to each other.
Oh, they do. Oh, yeah, people do that.
Now the thing is, can't we alter that culture where people just? I mean, is it the fact that comprehension levels are not too good? Because I mean, I see people having conversations and I don't understand what they're replying to, because what they're replying to didn't even make sense to me.
No, I know. And I think people don't. I think people jump to conclusions about things and all that online.
I'll pick out one sentence from
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is a big problem. I mean, there's always been fallings out in the movement. I mean, way back, you know, right when I first became involved. I mean, there's always been a level of falling out, but I think social media has amplified that.
Yeah.
It's become, you know,
it's the one thing. Well, there's a few things actually, kind of. Believe it or not, but that's one thing I agree with Tobias Leonhardt about, that we need to improve our communication skills within the movement as well as everything else.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. And another thing, sort of following on from that, is the lack of involvement of others. You know, I've known people that kind of, because numbers are so small, you get this idea, well, no one else is doing it, so why should I? No one else is putting themselves out, so why should I put myself out? There's that kind of attitude. I've experienced that from people, you know, like kind of.
But that's not thinking about the animals at all.
It's not thinking about the animals. No, it's thinking about, well, other people aren't doing it. So, you know, and a lot of it, you know, really, in a sense, all of this comes down to lack of appreciation of the true situation, that, you know, we live in, you know, reality of the conditions of existence on this planet is that our species is a horrific oppressor of all the others, and you know, there's like just for the food industry, 50,000 animals, fellow animals slaughtered every second of every day, and that's just for that. And then there's all these other things as well. That is, and it's of the utmost urgency that we do something about that. And as members of the oppressor species, we really kind of have a duty to do something about that, and for that to be our utmost priority for all of us. And it's people not appreciating that and putting other things in front of that and not really understanding the importance of that leads to all these different ways of people dropping out, because there's always a way of being active. You know, I do loads of activism on my own, and, you know, I'm, you know, go out and door drop leaflets and leave leaflets in public places and stuff. And I do lots of information stalls on my own. Tomorrow I've got an information stall at an event, and I'll be doing that on my own. There won't be anyone else doing that with me. I was doing it on my own. But yeah, it'd be great if other people did help. But that's not going to stop me from doing stuff.
But do you think it would stop a lot of people from doing it if they're on their own?
Yeah, but because they're not appreciated. It doesn't matter what other people do and what other people don't do. You know, that doesn't matter. What you do is you're trying to do the utmost you can, like as an individual, to end the oppression of our fellow animals. You know, that's what's important. It's about how do I as an individual lead a decent life? How do I as an individual lead the best life I can and lead the most worthwhile life I can? And surely that's in fighting against, you know, the worst ever tyranny that's ever occurred on this planet, isn't it? There's no more important thing to do than that. And whether other people join in or not, that's irrelevant to that. If other people join in, brilliant. If they don't, well, why should that stop anyone from doing it? You know, that's the thing. And I just, you know, we've had a really big decline in activists locally for lots of different reasons, you know, and COVID was a big reason for that. But there's other reasons as well, people moving away and stuff like that. And people have been active locally and they've moved away to other places, and they've not been active there. You know,
there's a couple of challenging posts. Trev is saying there are more vegans in more diverse groups. AV, We the Free. Now, used to be back in the 90s, you would say that a lot of people would be in a lot of these groups.
Yeah.
So it's not as though they would specialize in any of them. So I don't know whether that's changed, and that generally speaking, people pick one or two and stick to that.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, there are vegans that kind of are maybe members of these groups, but what I'm really talking about is people actually being activists, people actually getting out there and doing stuff. No.
Yeah, but We the Free is out there, isn't it? AV.
We the Free's out there. I mean, if someone's a member of We the Free, they're really an activist. Yeah, these things are happening, but you know, there should be massively more. That of the sort of vegan population, the number of people involved in actual activism is a tiny percentage. You know, even taking into account that there's all these different groups, it's a tiny percentage. And those are people that have never been active. I mean, what we're talking here is people that have been active and cease being active, and the different reasons for that. And that's a problem. The number of vegans never being active is a far greater problem. There's far more of them than activists that drop out of activism. There's far more people that have never been active. And so that, you know, that's another question. How do we actually encourage, persuade more vegans to actually be active in the...
Well, look at this comment, Ronnie. Do you understand any of this? Because I don't. So this is an age problem going the other way, I think, maybe.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, not knowing anything about how to organise a cyber attack or anything like that. I mean, it may be once again that you're probably talking about younger people that would have the knowledge to do these things, and if they're not into, you know, activism for our fellow animals, they're probably not going to do it. That's probably why.
Yeah, because this is like anonymous type stuff, isn't it? rather than AV. It's kind of,
Yeah, I mean there are cyber attacks. You do read about cyber attacks on different businesses, don't you? But I don't think any have been done for animal liberation reasons.
yeah, but the question is why?
Maybe because it's not a priority for the type of people that can do that type of thing. No.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, why isn't there activism of all sorts? Why has that become a lot less than it was? Which is a kind of a sort of bigger question, isn't it? Again, the changes in the culture of our society, I think, it's been a major reason for it. Starting with Margaret Thatcher, I think she was the one that started the ball rolling in that negative direction.
Yeah, well, you were talking about things getting in the way, and I've always said, and sorry if I'm saying this too many times, but Thatcher did great by selling people their own council houses, and so they're no longer paying rent; they're paying a mortgage, and so if they went on strike, they were very vulnerable then, which they weren't when they were paying rent because they just go into arrears. But if you go into arrears when you're paying a mortgage, you're out on your ear, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So I mean
right,
that was a kind of key move. And the second one was the creation. I mean, I was involved with this. The creation of what sociologists call a reserve army of labour. So I think 8 months into Thatcher coming into power, I got made redundant from Ford's. And so I was then kind of long-term unemployed, but that was on purpose. And there was a time, remember, when there's about 3 million people in Britain unemployed. Right now that acts as a social control over everybody on low-paid jobs, because the bosses could just say, "You put up with this. We're changing this, and if you don't like it, out," because we can get 20 people to replace you with a phone call, right?
Yeah.
So again, if your social situation is poor, then your activist thing, I mean, you can't imagine a poll tax thing or even reclaim the city anymore, can you?
No, not at all. No, not at all. And the other thing that made it easiest for us to be active as young people was that there wasn't the pressure to find work. I'm certainly not, kind of here in the UK. It wasn't the pressure to find work that there is now, where you have to go through all sorts of hoops and spend so many hours a day on a computer that they can monitor looking for a job if you're out of work. Basically because there were more people unemployed than there were jobs available. If you didn't want to work, they weren't bothered. You just went in because you had to go physically and sign on there at the unemployment office. And you just went and signed on, and it started off once a week, and then it went once every couple of weeks. And they didn't put you under any pressure to look for work.
I think it's a couple
And
of
so
times
if you were happy, well, but that enabled you to have a lot of time at your disposal to do stuff, to do activism. And if you were prepared to live simply and to live frugally, you could manage on the money. You could manage on the money because they pay your rent as well. Your rent would be paid like through some sort of housing benefit. So if you were prepared to live fairly frugally, which you could do, we managed to do it. Then you had all that time to do activism. But now you haven't got that because you've got to spend all day looking for work, which they can monitor. So that's made that in itself has made a big difference, I think, as well.
I always cite the Tommy Tiernan joke. You talk about Ireland, of course. So in the 1980s, there were no jobs, and that's if you were looking for one. So
well, yeah, even if you
just weren't available.
They were. I mean, I don't know what the situation is now, but you've got to show that you've got to show that you're looking for employment, and they can monitor that, and that's the problem because I read somewhere it's about 8 hours a day you had to do it for. Was it 6 hours a day? I mean, other people would know more than me, but it's horrendous,
actively on the computer kind of thing.
Yeah, and they can monitor it.
Right.
Yeah, it's just whereas we never had that, because and when they occasionally they used to say, "Have you been looking for work?" And I used to say, "Yeah, but no one wants to employ me because I've been in prison." And they go, "Well, fair enough," and that was it. They didn't, there was no, you didn't get put through, any kind of questioning or anything like that about not looking for work. Not like now.
Right, Ronnie, we're 90 minutes in. So have you got anything that you're burning?
No, I've covered. I think I've covered everything there that I wanted to say, and we've, I mean, obviously, we ourselves have faced quite a lot of this. I mean, we've been, involved in unsabs where both experienced some degree of violence from the hunting fraternity. We've been in jail, and we've both been involved in situations with people in the movement that weren't particularly pleasant, and we managed to come through all of that, and we're still, obviously.
I sabbed cub hunting in Cheshire once, and two guys grabbed us. One of them said if I didn't get out of the cover, he'd kill me, and another one said if I come out of the cover, he'd kill me.
So you killed if you did and killed if you don't. So
yeah, didn't give me many options really.
No.
So should we transfer to film then, Ronnie?
Yes.
Okay. So I prepared two films related to the kind of Thatcher was very sneaky. She was indeed. I prepared two films which are kind of on the kind of theme really, or skirting around it a little bit. The first one is Jeremy introducing Casey Taft. Now, Casey Taft, this is a really interesting thing because Casey's written about burnout or communication and looking after your mental health and everything, but he doesn't seem to be active anymore, which is a bit of an irony, maybe. I'm not sure, but again, it could be that he's doing loads and we don't know. So yeah. So I'm going to play that one first, and then I did a short interview with Jeremy earlier on, so I could play that to play us out, if you like. So do you want me to go full screen so we can have a rest, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that then. Right, here we go. First one.
And I've spoken with hundreds of members of the public about veganism. And the biggest shock to me is people just don't know. The average person walking down the street, they don't know what happens to male offspring in the dairy and egg industries. That's why it's so important for us to get out there and talk about it. And we're all different people and we all have our own way, but it's a matter of finding that way. So I'm really excited for you to hear Casey speak today. And I hope you get out as much out of his talk and his perspective as I have.
It's lonely being vegan. Let's talk a little bit about loneliness as a vegan. How many of you ever feel lonely being vegan? Raise your hand. Wow, so almost all of you feel that way. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about that. And throughout the book, I have quotes in there from vegans who've written to us or from online spaces. So what I've asked some of the members of the audience to do would be to stand up and read these quotes out loud to kind of get some group participation. I mostly ask folks in the front so they can kind of turn and face you and read it out loud so you can all hear.
When I posted on my Facebook page that zoos are unethical prisons for animals, my mother commented, "Without zoos, how will children develop an appreciation for all these different animals?" This was just after we had a family vacation where I had to watch them all eat animal corpses for every meal the entire week. How's that for animal appreciation? For the first time since I really became aware and went vegan, I'm feeling completely hopeless and alone. I could really use some vegan support right now to help me get past this lonely feeling today.
Great job. Can anybody relate to that sentiment at all in some way? It's a lot of heads nodding. So let's talk a little bit about that. feeling lonely or feeling depressed because of our animal advocacy, I think part of the reason that we experience loneliness is because just by virtue of being a vegan in the world, we create these shame responses in others. And I actually don't necessarily mean it exactly that way. We don't really create shame responses. Other people are responsible for their own feelings. But just by being a vegan, other people can feel guilt or shame. How many of you in the room have just told somebody you were vegan and got a really defensive response in the other person? Raise your hand. Who would say, for example, well, I don't eat animals that much, or I only eat humane meat, or I'm cutting down, or I don't eat chickens anymore, or that kind of stuff. Or sometimes they get even more hostile and they'll say something like, well, you think you're better than me, don't you? Or they'll start to bully or tease you in various ways. So there's a lot of head nods going on right now. So it's something we can all relate to. So just by being a vegan in the world, others can have a reaction to us. And that has to affect our relationship with other people if they feel guilt or shame just by being in our presence. These responses can range from mild discomfort to actual abusive behavior from other folks. Our greater awareness may conflict with family traditions, beliefs, and practices. And it's also difficult for us witnessing those who we love and care about directly do harm to non-human animals by consuming them and other forms of animal use. I know for myself when I see a family member consume animals and I know they're otherwise kind and caring and compassionate people, that's really difficult for me.
Right. Well, when I load up the other one, Ronnie, is there any comment you want to make about that one?
I mean, what they're talking about there is we've been talking about people dropping out of activism, but that's more about people being vegan. And I kind of think a big way of, like I've mentioned earlier, a big way of combating that loneliness is actually to become active. To become active, become involved in a community of activists. And then you're no longer lonely. You're in touch with other vegans.
I think they were talking more about what the Sarah was talking about at the beginning.
Yeah,
which was a prompt for the show.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, social media is a double-edged sword, and we've talked about some of the negative aspects, but the positive aspect of it is it does make it easier for vegans to communicate one with another. And so even if you've got a vegan that's kind of physically isolated from other vegans, they live in a tiny village that's miles from anywhere, and they're the only vegan in the village, and they can still find and communicate with other vegans via social media. So that's that can be a kind of a help with loneliness in that respect.
Yeah, the only vegan in the village.
The only vegan in the village. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is what we put together earlier on. So again, this goes on a little bit longer than that one. I had a strict budget of 10 minutes, which I didn't keep to, I'm afraid. But let's go. I'll go full screen again, Ronnie. Welcome along. This is a bit new for you in a way, because this is a still alive recording, which is a bit weird. But there you go. How are you doing?
Good. Technically, I'm still alive, so the title fits. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's three. That makes three of us at least. So how's the sanctuary?
It's going really well, thank you. We're into our, I guess, second year since starting intakes, and yeah, we're doing the micro sanctuary focus. So not trying to grow big, but focus on kind of keeping things sustainable for my wife Nish and I to run things. And it's honestly just I could talk for hours about it, but it's really been a life improvement.
Well,
just being in the country.
I'm not going to give you the opportunity for that. I was going to say,
where's that mute button?
I wanted to ask you about the sanctuary first. Priorities and all that. So Nisha's doing well.
Yeah, she is. She actually just got back from New Zealand, and it was a unique experience for me because it was my first time doing everything by myself for 3 weeks. And there's some things that we kind of have she might make the food for the fishes, for instance, and I did that this time. So it was good to kind of do everything, and I think we showed we are kind of sustainable in the sense that just one of us can run it. So that's kind of the goal going forward. And so hopefully having two of us
So
you know,
you can have
we're well
two
covered.
sanctuaries now.
Yeah,
And that, and
yeah,
that,
definitely. Yeah, get the property gets this across the street. Let's see what we can do.
so that's Dexter in the background too. So
He's our head of
oh,
security. You can tell he's secured the west flank here, so he's making sure the perimeter's all secure and everybody's in order.
yeah, yeah. Well, talking of security, you've got some issues where you're living, but we won't go into that.
You
Now
said you wanted to keep this short, right?
yeah. So you've seen the clip that we showed. We've kind of showed it already by the time we get to play this, but you've seen the clip, and it seems to be posted by somebody called Sarah. But they've got their username is inspired by Sarah, which is a bit misleading, but I think their name is Sarah. And she says that the majority of the time she blocks out the emotions caused by what she knows about what our fellow animals go through. And do you think that's common? I did look in the comment section of her video, and everybody's kind of going, yeah, it's the same for me. And every time I see a truck, she mentions, presumably livestock trucks. She said, loads of people in the comments said, I burst into tears every single time. So I wonder whether we haven't really taken seriously the trauma of being vegan, if that's not too dramatic.
Yeah, I think we're all different people, aren't we? And we have different personalities and emotional compositions. I know for me, I try to allow the emotions when I feel them necessary, but also kind of not let them consume me, because I think there's definitely a balance that's necessary there. On the truck thing, it bothers me every time. I'm not going to pretend it, I can shut down to that. I oftentimes just look at them and kind of, say to myself or out loud sometimes, I see you, we're trying, we're doing our best, that kind of thing. And just kind of, it's messy, isn't it? Like with watching graphic footage is another example. That's a huge, obviously kind of, I would argue, necessary part of, our fellow animals movement. But at the same time, if we watch that every day, and it can kind of consume us. I know at the sanctuary now when, I'm down with the pigs or goats or whoever, and I think back to the footage I've edited in the past, and I don't think I knew how much harm that was doing when I was doing it. So just being kind of, I guess back to the emotion thing, kind of navigate them. So I would say not completely shutting them out, but also managing them in a way that doesn't consume us.
Yeah, it's tricky. I know that she said about seeing our fellow animals in the fields. I know somebody who used to kind of do the kind of R response. Oh, look, kind of lambs. And then the more they learned about what was going on, it stopped because exactly what she said. Oh, blimey, in 3 weeks' time, they're not going to be here.
Yeah, same as the trucks, isn't it? It's bittersweet, especially when you see them running and playing in something. It's some action like that. It's hard not to say, oh wow, because there's this asymmetry, isn't there, between like, oh wow, they're so incredible, and oh wow, this is what's going to happen to them. And these things, these sites are everywhere, aren't they?
So the overall program today is about, Ronnie and I have kind of kept going. I suppose we both had a bit of a holiday, which was enforced on us, which was possibly quite useful. But I do know that some vegans would say to this person, you're focused on yourself and not our fellow animals, almost accusing her of being a bit selfish. Now, I wouldn't do that, but there are some vegans who would say that, aren't there?
Yeah, I guess it's tough because I think I know for myself when I first came to this advocacy, I just wanted everything to stop. Not like tomorrow, today. I just figured I'd really go, really dig deep and push myself a year or two, and we just be through the end of it. And I think a lot of new advocates for fellow animals do this, and it's very disheartening when that's not the case. And I think just looking back at the big picture, we're going to be much more effective over the course of our lives if we think of sustainable ways we can do things versus, I think it is the case that over a year or two, we maybe dig a bit too deep, and then it's not sustainable, and maybe there's issues with groups that we used to attend, or this, that, the other, and it can be challenging. I think you and Ronnie are a great example of who has made it work. So yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons in that.
Yeah, I do agree that I think people kind of steam in to the movement, and then, I think 2, 3, 4 years in, that's the time when they're vulnerable to burnout. I think. Do you think what we're watching really is this is just more of Reagan's revolving door that we haven't as a movement? I'm not quite sure if the analogy works really, and for those who don't know, it means that we're good at recruiting, but for everyone who joins, one person seems to leave. That was the idea of the revolving door. Do you think we've never solved that problem?
I guess it's maybe part of the human condition, isn't it? To try to do anything sustainably through one's life is a challenge, and I think for a fellow animals movement, there's a whole lot more wrapped up in that. We talked about the emotional component. There's the social component of finding fellow advocates we can work well with, in groups, and just personal lives. If we're, our lives are consumed by, a job, for instance, to get a paycheck, it's going to be very difficult to kind of, balance that with these other forces. Not just for a short time, but for our entire lives. There's a lot of competing forces, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I don't think we've solved it, and I think I'm big on kind of doing a personal inventory. So I try to do this for myself. If we write down all the positive influences in our world, all the negative influences, and then go through again and say, okay, can we actually change any of these things? And for the things we can change, maximizing the positive and limiting the negative. And this could be like, the people we surround ourselves with too. But there's lots, for myself, it's going out for a bike ride to recharge, and maybe avoiding negative social media that's going to drain me, or the graphic footage like we talked about. So lots of examples there. But yeah, we haven't solved it.
I came into the movement when there wasn't very much actual film at all. It was just written material, which is interesting. So obviously you can become an advocate without watching that kind of stuff in a way. But in terms of watching or what we know and what the public know, you said in your intro that we're going to show, or we have already shown, I'm not quite sure yet.
If you don't know, I'm definitely not going to know.
Yeah, no, yeah. You said in your intro to Casey that people just don't know. And you mentioned the male chicks, etc., and that kind of stuff. Now, do you think that's still the case? Some activists would say that time, that those excuses are less and less valid now. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess, I started living vegan when I was in Singapore. Then I spent most of my advocacy years in the UK, and now I'm in the US in Georgia, and also spent some time in Indiana. So I guess the questions may be a bit different everywhere we go. In my experience, I think it's very much still the case that humans aren't as aware of some of these factors. I think we've got a huge amount of competing forces against us, and maybe this is a question for another day, but I know a big focus is around the treatment versus abolitionist messaging. And when we've got companies both on the advocate side, in quotes, and the ones profiting from these animal use industries, for a crude language, they're all telling us that this can be done in an ethical way, quote unquote. So I think absolutely people still believe there's a ethical form of animal use, and the egg thing is one example.
I agree with you. I think most people still don't know, and that obviously leads into Ronnie's thing about we need vegan education all the time and everywhere, because I think that when you're in the vegan bubble, we can overemphasize and exaggerate the amount that's going on. But for your average person, they don't see much. They never tune into anything on YouTube. They never come across a demo or a stall. They just don't see kind of much of it. So it does kind of prove in a way that we've just got to do more education and outreach. than we are now, because and don't get complacent that we're doing loads, because I don't think we are really.
I think that's one of our biggest challenges is the kind of knowing our audience, because so much of it is guesswork. I mean, as a short story, I was recently having a conversation with someone else who's in the sanctuary scene around, should we be focusing on caring for potbelly pigs who are smaller, or big quote farm pigs that are more commonly used for wider animal use, as it were. And I guess for the average consumer, in quotes, they're just getting them in a packet, wrapped up. So do they even connect a small pig with a big pig, putting it, really bluntly? So it's really hard to know even what's the best form of advocacy from that angle. And yeah, when it comes to our language and everything else, it's really difficult to assume what they do or do not know. I tend to start from a baseline and let them tell me what they know, and then build from there. I found that's worked best for me.
Yeah, I do that as well, and it does underline your point, because if you say, for example, can you explain how what you call meat arrives on your plate, they can't. I mean, they've just got some vague kind of ideas. They think there's a vet involved with euthanasia or something, and all those kind of things. In the comment section that was read out in the Casey thing, one about zoos, and they said that it emphasizes this idea that a lot of vegans feel that they're alone, and that's one. It's lonely being vegan, Casey said, and again, it's a kind of repeat of the same problem, isn't it? That there's not that many of us. Maybe the social side of our movement is lacking or something, but also you get the other side of it, where the activists complain that most vegans just do the social side, and they don't do activism. What's going on?
Yeah, maybe it's back
Tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess our conversation about emotions, maybe it's not kind of all on or all off, maybe finding balance in the middle. I know for me, as far as the loneliness factor, I mean, we're all different people. I know it's worked well for me, and one part of the reason why I like living on a micro sanctuary so much is, the whole thing we're the average of the people who surround us. If we're going to really reject human supremacy and speciesism, they need not be human. For me, I've got my partner Nisha, but I've got Dexter here. We've got a couple pigs, a couple goats, a pond full of fishes. They're my social world, so I am never lonely when you look at it that way. But from an outsider's perspective, I live in the country with my wife and all these animals, and aren't you lonely? Well, from my perspective, my social world's never been richer. It's just a matter of perspective, I think.
Yeah, well, I think vegans can have as many friends as they like, but if none of their friends understand their veganism, that is lonely, isn't it? So
it's a difficult compromise, and especially friends we had before we were vegan, navigating. Okay, well, we had this baseline. This has changed. Navigating that.
Right. So the final point that I wanted to raise was Casey talks about the shame response in others, and he was careful to say that we don't create it. They kind of create it for themselves, as it were. And obviously there must be a difference between shame that they impose on themselves and ones that we do. I just wonder whether there might be some advocacy styles that may seek to create shame in others, kind of on purpose, and see that as motivating for change. I'm never quite sure how to conclude on that one. I think it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. What do you think?
Well, it's most importantly, it's six of one, half a dozen avocados, right?
Yes.
not eggs. Yeah, I think it's tough. I think this is another thing where balance is needed. I know when I first started and was, like I say, super vocal to get out there and talk about what's our fellow animals are forced to endure. It's I think the shame response is a necessary component. I know it was for me. I think I wouldn't have been motivated to stop supporting animal use or speak out against it if I didn't feel some shame. I think most importantly, to the extent that that can come from within us versus being kind of, for lack of a better term, forced on us by others, it's
But
probably
is
going to
it
be more
shame or
effective.
is it guilt, or is that the same? Is guilt and shame the same?
I guess my understanding is that guilt is about one's actions, whereas shame is about oneself. So if I do something that's bad and I feel bad about the action, I feel guilt. But if I do something I feel bad as a person, that's much deeper, and that's where kind of shame comes into it. Which I think I did feel bad as a person when I, really came to realization of what I was supporting, and dare I use the H word, I do still think it is a holocaust against our fellow animals. And I think that's a word that could evoke shame. So it kind of comes to the conversation, like, should we avoid language that, may make someone feel shame? And, I know that's been a big conversation for us in the past. I just try to navigate in such a way that I'm not completely trying to avoid the shame, but also not trying to kind of, overly crowbar it out of someone, because it does need to come from within, if that makes sense.
Well, as I said, the theme of the show is that, me and Ronnie have just ploughed on. And I suppose some people can, some people can't. But I don't suppose any movement, be it the vegan one or anyone else, is going to be able to stop kind of burnout or people just fading away, when it's not being what they expected, or it's not being something that they can cope with. I suppose it's just going to be something that movements have to deal with in a way that they don't know how to.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I guess two quick things I'll just throw in there because I know we're wrapping up. But I think not focusing too much on external measures. I know I did that a bit too much at first. Thinking this many activists in, this many activists out. This is the trend one way or the other. Are we winning kind of thing? I think everything we do is important, even if we quote lose. The actions we took still hopefully helped and advocated for some, which I think is valuable. And back to the burnout thing, I'd encourage everyone to look up a local sanctuary, come out, hang out with fellow animals. If you're in Georgia, look us up, because I know the sanctuary scene has really helped me stay sustainable and avoid burnout.
Before you go, and I'm really good at doing this kind of, that's the last thing, so we've done 3 last things now. Maybe you could maybe mention Casey's books, and also possibly where people could engage with his work, maybe vegan publishers. Perhaps it's not active, but it's still there, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe the website's there. I haven't looked at it recently. Motivational Methods for Vegan Advocacy, I know, is my go-to. It was super empowering for just learning how to communicate these things. That's a whole other topic, which would probably bring up a few last things that I won't.
Is that a website or just a Facebook page?
It is a website, yeah.
A website, right? Okay.
But yeah, and also Millennial Vegans was another book, and yeah, I would encourage you to go to the website. There's some stuff on my YouTube channel. If you just search for his name, that'll come up. I know I tried to document his work, for the modern age of YouTube and whatnot. But if you just search on YouTube, you will get some of his work. And I know I'm in the process of updating my old website, Vegan Interactions, that is inspired by a lot of his work too, from a communication and self-care perspective.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks again, Jeremy, and stay well. You're looking good, young man, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me, Roger. Always a pleasure.
Voila. So there's one last thing that I was going to show, because after that little interview, Jeremy sent me the Vegan Publishers website. So let me see if I can bring that up. And this is interesting because I could do this on that screen. There. Okay, so yeah, so the website is still active, as you can see, and I think there's about 60 odd books. So I'm not quite sure if you can still buy them, but there's loads of kids' books, which is quite interesting, with kind of Christmas coming up and all that. So you've still got, everything seems to be working. So I don't know whether somebody's maintaining it, but yeah, so the website's still there, and the Facebook group is definitely still there as well. So that's something that where people could go. There's also Claire Mann that you're familiar with, I think, Ronnie, who does Dystopia, right? There is another psychologist involved with pro veg, but I can't remember the name, so we won't bother with that. Well, we've been on 2 hours now, Ronnie, so I think we might have done enough. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one thing Jerry mentioned was, people having to go out and work and their time being limited. And I think it's like a question of, it is true that that everything we do matters, and not all of us have the same amount of time at our disposal. Everyone's got other things going on in their life, some more than others. But I think it's a question of us all as vegans thinking, how can we fit vegan outreach somewhere into our life, even if it's like, spending half an hour door dropping some leaflets every couple of weeks or something like that, or leaving, I leave leaflets on public transport and in public places. But being always mindful of how we can spread the message, even if we can only do it in a small way, because if all vegans did it in a small way, then that would add up to really, really something, wouldn't it? Because there are, a considerable number of us now. And I think that's the thing, that activism doesn't have to be like, necessarily out in the street, holding a screen or anything like that, although it's great that people do that. There's lots of ways, there's lots of small ways we can do it. And I think
we need to bear in mind that Dad has said it on a number of occasions that that door dropping is illegal, I think, in the state.
Well, I think I think, yeah, I think it can. Yeah, I think there are maybe some places in the states where it's difficult, but then that people could still leave leaflets in public places and stuff like that. There's still ways of disseminating the information. One way of doing, I've done it, very occasionally, is go into a public library and put leaflets inside books that I think people might where the people might be more amenable to going vegan, books about animals and stuff like that. I've done the same in supermarkets with magazines and put leaflets inside. There's all these little things, all the small things. Because if you look at it, is the reason why our fellow animals are oppressed in the first place is really through all the small things, isn't it? It's through the small choices that people make in their life. Choice to buy a particular product instead of another product. To go to one source of entertainment instead of another source of entertainment, for instance, and even who they put their cross against on a ballot paper in terms of who may be more or less favourable to animal protection. All these small things that people do in their lives that add up to horrendous oppression of our fellow animals. But it's also through all the small things we can change that. People, if people as consumers, reject animal products, if where they go for entertainment, they refuse to go to the greyhound racing or the horse racing, in some countries maybe the bullfighting and stuff like that.
So that's a form of activism, though, right, Ronnie?
Yeah, and that's just people in their everyday life. But in terms of activism as well, all small things can add up. People. I know people that have become vegan because they picked up a leaflet in a public place, for instance. So all these small things. So be ever mindful of, how we can spread the vegan message, even if we can only do it in a small way, because restriction of our time and other things in our life. That everyone can be an activist. Just because you can't, go out for quite a few hours on a Saturday in the street to do stuff doesn't mean you can't be an activist. There's loads of ways that you can do it. And I think it's important for everyone to, to think, how can I use some of my time to spread the message?
What's the score with fly posting nowadays? We used to do loads of fly posting.
Well, it's always been illegal.
I mean, the cops are not bothered, really, are they?
No, it would be more the local authority that would be concerned if there was a council official came along. I mean, obviously, if you're caught fly posting, you can be prosecuted. But once again, that's another way of doing it. Sticking up posters is a way of doing it. I mean, my car is a big advert for veganism. I've got all sorts of stuff on you know, the back, because I've got it's like a kind of van conversion type thing, and so it's got like a flat back, and so I've got all sorts of stuff promoting veganism and animal rights.
I've got a flat back as well, funny enough.
Yeah, you will have now sat in that chair. But I mean, not everyone, some people might be worried about that because the area they live in, they think, well, my car won't last 5 minutes where I live with stuff like that. But I'm probably fortunate in that sense that I'm able to do that and use that as a form of
well, nobody's going to steal a car full of.
No one's going to steal the car. No, I'm thinking about more damage. I was worried that we have these travellers come round collecting scrap, in a big van, and I'm always worried they'll take my car away, thinking that it's scrap.
Yeah, you couldn't blame them.
No,
right,
no. But anyway, so that's the thing that we can all become active in spreading the vegan message, and I think it's like we can, it doesn't have to be a stressful experience, and it doesn't have to be something that we can find traumatic. And I think that we can, if it gets
those, that top 10 video that we did, we'll have to put that out again.
Yeah, there are all different ways of doing activism, and just because someone feels they can't do the kind of the more stressful activism anymore, there's plenty of less stressful activism they can do. They don't have to kind of totally withdraw from everything. That's the thing. I mean, that's something I've found myself. I mean, the activism I do these days is very, very low stress. And a lot of it's just simple stuff that I can kind of do on my own because there's not the people about that there used to be locally. And that, it's a long way away from what I used to do, way back in the 70s and 80s. But it's still activism, and it's still...
Yeah, you were just doing low-key stuff back then, weren't you, Ronnie?
Yeah, very, very, very low-key. But, just because you can't do the big stuff, that doesn't mean you can't do... Well, the big stuff, the more kind of exciting stuff, perhaps.
All the big stuff will be illegal soon, don't worry. So,
yes, yeah. Well, a lot of it is already, isn't it? But,
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah,
even more might be.
But there we go. I'd like to thank everybody for sticking with us. We're on 2 hours and 7 minutes, so you've done very well. So thank you very much on that. Now, we can't promise that we're going to be back next week. I mean, 3 weeks.
No, we're going to. I think we're going to have to lie. We're going to have to lie down for a couple of weeks
in a darkened room somewhere, Ronnie.
Yeah.
But even though we might not be back next week, but we might not be, but we will be back at some point, providing, Ronnie,
we are still alive.